Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to week 2 of remote learning. It is I, Mr. Seifert, getting ready to do our weekly YouTube video that you are supposed to watch before we jump into the assignments. So a couple things I wanted to get started on and a couple things I wanted to start off with. Was last week's work, okay, the homework assignments that were posted to Google Classroom. The homework was to fill out that Springwood Middle School census. Again, we reviewed the purpose of the census that is taken by United States citizens, why they have it, what the reason for it was, and your homework was to do a sample Springwood Middle School census where you kind of tell me about your demographics, where you live, and the people who are living in your residence. So a couple things I wanted to point out about that. First of all, we had a 51% turn-in rate. When I did the math, there were 75 out of 148 students that completed their assignment. Now, when I say they completed it, they filled in the answers and they turned it in via Google Classroom. I think there were some students who typed in their answers but forgot to submit it via Google Classroom. Now, please remember, I'm only going to be viewing work that has been submitted or turned in via Google Classroom. So when you get done with that assignment for the week or every Monday or Wednesday, whatever you finish that assignment, make sure you turn it into Google Classroom. That's what I'm going to be using to put grades into Skyward. Okay, now remember, just as a recap, the grades can only be put in if they benefit your grade. They cannot be put in that if they are going to harm your overall score. Now, with that being said, we are still requiring that you do the work. Okay, even if you have an A+ or whatever, you still are required to do the work. The reason for that is we as teachers are going to be looking, and we have a spreadsheet of who's doing their work for each class. And if we see that your name keeps popping up and you are not completing your assignments, we are going to be contacting home to make sure that your parents and guardians know that, hey, they're not attending the Zoom conferences or they're not doing their work for social studies or math or science or language arts or whatever the case may be. So I want to see that 51% go up. I would like 100% completion out of my students. I know that's a tough goal to achieve, but if anyone can do it, I know it is my students. All right. Skyward is up to date. I did put in the grades for that U.S. Census. So go on and check your Skyward, see if yours is missing or if yours is turned in. Everybody who did turn it in, everybody did very well. So again, please make sure that you are updating your Skyward as well, making sure that you are staying current with that. Next, this week's content that we are going to be discussing is we are going to be talking about the Illinois Constitution. Right now, the Illinois Constitution is very similar to the U.S. Constitution. Okay, we talked about this a little bit in class, where the United States Constitution is more focused on the U.S. as a whole. All 50 states have to abide by the U.S. Constitution, whereas the Illinois Constitution only applies to the citizens who are living in Illinois. All right, so the U.S. Constitution is the supreme law of the land, remember, but every state has their own state constitution that is more specific to their state rules and rules for their citizens. The example we used in class frequently was gun laws. The U.S. Constitution, the Second Amendment says, I am allowed to own a firearm. The Illinois Constitution says you are allowed to own a firearm, but you need to have certain identification in order to own a firearm, and you are not allowed to carry it on your person. All right, so it doesn't contradict what the U.S. Constitution says, but the Illinois Constitution is more specific to its citizens. Now, the question that we always asked in class was, why was the U.S. Constitution divided up into 3 branches? Why was our government divided into 3 branches? And remember, that's because we didn't want to fall into the same pattern of one person having too much power. So we divided into the executive branch, the legislative branch, the judicial branch. And that's exactly what the Illinois Constitution does as well. I want to show you this graphic. If you look at your screen, right, This is directly out of the Illinois Constitution Handbook. All right. This is federalism. That's the term we use in class a lot. This is federalism. The U.S. Constitution divides power among the federal government, which is right over here, and the state governments. Now, I'm going to be posting this sheet of or this doc on our Google Classroom so you can refer back to it. But just notice some of the differences. There are a ton of similarities and a couple differences. All right. So U.S. Constitution, federal government, state government. In the federal government, we have a president. All right, and he has his departments, his cabinet members. We have a Congress, which is Senate and the House of Representatives. And then we have the U.S. Supreme Court, which makes sure everything is constitutional. And then underneath the Supreme Court, there are circuit courts and then there are district courts. If you look over at the state government, it's a very similar layout. How many branches do you see? Well, 1, 2, 3. We have a legislative, we have an executive, and we have a judicial branch in our Illinois Constitution as well. Again, we do that because we don't want one person having too much power. Rather than having a president, though, we have a governor. Okay, that's the leader of our state. Rather than having Congress, we have a legislature, but look, similarity. It's divided up into the Senate and the House of Reps. Now, the numbers are going to be a little different than in the federal system in the U.S. Congress. The numbers are going to be a little different because obviously our population is smaller than the United States population. And then finally, in our judicial branch, we have a state Supreme Court. We don't have a U.S. Supreme Court. We have a state Supreme Court. And then underneath that, there are appellate courts and trial courts. So same format for federal government and state government. It's the same format. It's just labeled differently. We still have 3 branches. All right. Again, why do we divide that power in our state government? Because we don't want one person having too much power. All right. So again, look at that. See if you can find the similarities and differences. We just kind of went over them. All right. Your assignment for this week is going to deal with creating our own constitution. If you remember at the beginning of the year, we made those shared agreements on how we want our classroom to be run. Now, obviously, we are not in the classroom anymore. We are using our conferences or our class time to Zoom, our Zoom video conferences. So what I want you to do for this week's assignment, now remember, this will be posted on Wednesday. All right, what I want you to do, the directions say at the very beginning of the school year, we created a set of shared agreements that we use as our classroom constitution. Based on some of those expectations, what do you think are some rules or expectations we should implement during our video conferences? And it says to please list 3. So what I want you to do is I want you to list 3 rules you think we should have during our Zoom conferences. And we're going to come up with kind of a shared agreements for that class time, that 25 minutes we have during video conferencing. The last question, there are 4 questions. The last question says, why do we need a set of shared agreements for these meetings? So that's just your opinion telling me why you think we need a constitution for our Zoom conferences. So that's what you're doing this week. All right, again, be sure to look at this graphic. I will be posting it on the Google Classroom. And then to close out, all right, once you finish this assignment, again, make sure you do turn it in via Google Classroom. To close out, just discussing and introducing the ideas for next week, we're going to be talking about ancient Greece and the origins of democracy. You know, we spent so much time this year talking about democracy and how power needs to lie with the people. Well, where did that idea come from? And we're going to explore that next week. So that all those assignments will be posted next Monday, and that video will be posted next Monday. So don't worry about the ancient Greece stuff yet. Your priority right now is to look at this graphic and to fill out your Zoom conference constitution homework and make sure you turn that in. Go check Skyward. Make sure you guys are staying safe. Just know how much I miss you. I mean, I repeat that every week. And other than that, I will catch you all later. See ya.